This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, we share some of the best and worst movies of 2023, and I'm pretty sure two of my choices are going to shock you. We talk with the critical drinker, the YouTube critic, who's got Hollywood executives trembling in fear, at least that they know what's good for them. And we reveal why Taylor Swift is going to wish 2023 never ended. The new year could get ugly for her.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Before we begin, I'd love it if you subscribe to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. We've got new episodes every Wednesday, more bonus episodes on the way, and in 2024, we will be going all video very soon. Check it out. The toughest part of my job should be sitting through really terrible movies, and it is, and it stinks. But the trickiest part of my job is coming up with the best of list every year. It gets tougher and tougher, and the Oscar bait movies just aren't helping. They should, but they're not. I'm sorry, but Killers of the Flower Moon was good, not great. Maestro, good, but not great. Poor Things, May, December, you get the idea. No, I love loving movies. That's why I got into this business. Who becomes a film critic unless you really adore movies and just celebrate them? And I do, and I have, and I will. But it happens less and less lately. But one recent movie did make me feel like a kid again, in the very best of ways. Now, I'm not alone in growing up watching Godzilla movies. Maybe it's more of a boy thing than a girl thing. I don't know. I'm sure girls love it as well. But looking back, it's not easy to see those movies. They're not good. They're cringeworthy. I recently rewatched just the ending, because the ending was spectacular, according to my memory, of Destroy All Monsters, my favorite of all the Godzilla movies. And it was rough sledding, man. What was I thinking as a kid? Well, I was a kid. I didn't know. I didn't have Netflix back then. Now, it's why Godzilla Minus One is a miracle of sorts. It's a really good Godzilla movie. It's got strong characters. You care about what's happening on the screen, even when Godzilla is away from the screen. And, of course, you've got the big green guy stomping through a city. That's never not fun. Why couldn't Hollywood make a Godzilla movie like this? They've tried multiple times in recent years. There was one with Matthew Broderick. The last few years, we've seen, I think, 3 of them. Sometimes with King Kong. Sometimes Godzilla's working solo. They're fine, they're watchable, but really painful when the Godzilla character is off the screen. The characters are just boring or cliched, or you can tell is given no attention to detail. But Godzilla Minus One is a blast. And I know that because even my wife loved it. Now, she's never seen a Godzilla movie, ever. Not as a kid, not now. She's never seen any of the Star Wars movies. Nothing sci-fi or horror at all. Doesn't like those genres. Yes, we're in a mixed marriage. But you know what? She loved it, and that's a good sign. This is a movie that really does cut across demographics. It's wonderful. So if you haven't seen Godzilla Minus One yet, it is still in theaters, maybe fading. Check it out. Another really good movie this year was The Holdovers. It was a bittersweet comedy about a high school teacher who has to look over a group of children over the holidays. Either their homes are busy or the parents are away. All the different complications ensue, and he's looking over one particular student who's a bit troubled, and the two of them connect in really interesting ways. Now, this is the kind of movie that is enjoyable, certainly great for this time of the year, but it also might give Paul Giamatti, the star, an Oscar for Best Actor. That would be fitting and very cool. He is terrific, always. It's about time he got recognized, and this could be his moment. But I also loved Reopening. It's a movie from Blaze Media. Yeah, Glenn Beck's empire. It's amazing. They don't do a lot of movies. They acquired this movie a few months back, and it is excellent. Really funny comedy. Think Waiting for Guffman, that classic theater comedy. But then you mix in COVID and all those precautions. Oh, it's really good, and it's snarky, and it's satirical, but it's not mean-spirited. Definitely check it out. It's worth the subscription price for Blaze Media. But what about the clunkers? Well, I don't want to get bogged down in them. It's kind of depressing, but there are 2 that really grinded my gears. Is that an offensive phrase? It feels like it could be or should be, but I don't know. We'll see. Saltburn is out now. Just got added to the Amazon Prime set list, and it's getting some award season consideration. People are talking about it. Maybe some Best Actor nominations. We shall have to see, but it doesn't deserve it. It really doesn't. It's one of those we hate the rich movies, and I actually have no problem with that. The rich are imperfect, and they deserve to be skewered at times for sure. And last year's movie, The Menu, did just that, but it was excellent. It was original, it was fun, it was creepy, it was unpredictable. I have no problem with hate the rich movies. I have a problem with bad hate the rich movies, and that's exactly what Saltburn is. It's dull at times, and it's very shocking. And of course, when you do shocking material and there's nothing underneath, it's just shocking without substance. And that is just kind of sad. Now, one of the things I really didn't like about the movie is that the main characters, the psychological portrait that's being portrayed here, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. It doesn't hang together. And that matters. And then there's the blackening. Now, I love horror comedies. You throw in some satire in there, even if it's from the left, who cares? It's a great combination. Unless the ingredients have gone sour before the filmmakers started rolling cameras, and that's what happened here, I think. Even the premise doesn't make any sense. The whole marketing campaign behind the blackening was, why do horror movies keep killing off the black character first? Well, they don't. I've seen a gazillion horror movies. This isn't true. This isn't a trope. It's not like The Final Girl, which is a legit trope which has been around for decades. It's not true. I saw a website, I think they collected about 50 horror movies, pretty prominent ones, and said, okay, which character died first, and was the character a character of color? Nope. The vast, vast majority were either white or certainly not black. So the whole idea just stinks. But, listen, you could trot out that as a marketing campaign, get people to see The Blackening. Maybe it's a good movie. No, it's not. Now, I took my kid to see The Blackening because he loves horror comedy just like his old man. We sat stone-faced through the movie. It was uncomfortable. It was amateurish. I think it was the most unpleasant sit, as you could say, for me as a critic this year. But do you agree? Have you seen them? Disagree? Disagree aggressively? Well, fire away. Let me know. Email me at christian@hollywoodintoto.com. I would love to hear your thoughts. There's only one good thing, about seeing a bad movie these days. You know that the Critical Drinker is out there, and he's going to roast it from his YouTube channel. Nobody skewers a film, and I mean nobody like the Critical Drinker. His put-downs are legendary, and of course they have that Scottish accent to make him even tougher, even bolder. But those rants, they've made him a star on YouTube, and rightly so, he's good. But the not-so-dirty secret about the Drinker is that he knows what he's talking about. Listen, anyone can trash the Marvels or Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's easy. It's shooting fish in a barrel. But the Drinker breaks things down in ways that show you what went wrong and how the filmmakers could have avoided it. That's helpful. That's good criticism. Some of Drinker's fans may not know it, but he's also an author. He puts that storytelling knowledge to good use in books like the Ryan Drake series and his most recent novel, a zombie fest called Dark Harvest, which is inspired by a true story, but I think he takes some flights of fancy from there. Now, I reached out to the Drinker to see if he wanted to join this show and share a little bit about what makes him tick, and he happily obliged. Meet the man behind the YouTube voice that sends chills up Hollywood's spine, the Critical Drinker. Critical Drinker, thank you for joining the show. I really enjoy your work. I want to start with a very basic question. It's been considered a gotcha moment at times in the recent past, but I think it's one that you will knock out of the park. What is a woke movie or TV show? I think that's a good place to start, and we can kind of spread out from there. And also, why is it often, but not always, so bad?
Okay, this is something that I made an entire video on because I wanted to get my position on this clear as possible. There's nothing wrong whatsoever with progressive messages and interesting ideas being put forward by movies. That is fine by me. The point where it crosses over into woke, and this is a word that I don't like to use very often in my own videos because it's been overused to the point where it's essentially meaningless right now. But if I was to try and define it in terms of movies and TV shows and stuff, it's the point where political messaging and ideology gets in the way of the actual story that you want to tell. becomes like the overriding factor that takes precedent over good storytelling, good character development, all that stuff. And that's the point where it becomes quote unquote woke and a problem, a detriment to the storytelling possibilities of your project.
And I would add, it often takes you out of the experience. You're watching a movie, you're getting wrapped up in the story, you care about the characters, then boom, there's a lecture, there's a moment, there's a message, and it's so obvious, it's in neon lights, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about that, not the story.
Exactly, yeah. And like, why do most of us watch movies? Why do most of us watch TV shows? We want a little bit of escapist fun most of the time. We want to escape from the dull monotony of everyday life. We want to escape from being preached to and lectured to and told that we're the center of all the problems in the world, and just enjoy ourselves for a little while. And when you see that coming at you in movies, like you say, it takes you out of the experience and it puts you right back in day-to-day life. And that's exactly where you don't want to be most of the time.
Now, you're first and foremost a critic, obviously. Your review of Lady Ballers I thought was really interesting because I've read a couple of, I guess you'd call them mainstream reviews, and they were hyperbolic, they were outrageous, they were, name-calling, all the things I don't think you should do as a critic, and yet you were open to the film, but you shared some really pointed critiques of it. You didn't, you had a very solid explanation why you thought this was weak, that was weak. Why can't more critics do that? I mean, like you said, you're okay with a progressive story if it's entertaining, but I think there are too many critics now who just, if it is right of center, if it's right leaning, or if it's just different, they will essentially shut down and name call and be almost like a child, pounding his or her fists. Why is that happening? Why can't more critics just take it for what it is and say, hey, I don't agree with it, but it's great, or it's bad, or it's indifferent, or these are the reasons why? What's happening in the culture?
It's very much a guilt by association kind of situation where even just talking about a film like that, like, it instantly gets you labeled as being right wing somehow in certain circles. But you're somehow associated with this movie just because you're talking about it, and you could be there to criticize every aspect of it for all we know. But that's just the mindset that a lot of these critics get into, and it's an element of intellectual cowardice as far as I'm concerned. Like, I approach it very much from a politically neutral standpoint, and that's always been my opinion on movie reviewing or media consumption or anything like that. I'm not interested in the politics behind it. I just want to review it on its own merits. And for that reason, I'm more than happy to talk about a movie like that. And I want to approach this from the point of view of, would the average Joe, the cinema goer who doesn't have any particular political leanings, he's not a staunch conservative, he's not a staunch liberal, he's just a guy who likes to be amused, and in this case, he just wants a comedy movie that he's going to have fun with. Is he going to get a kick out of that? Yes or no? That's how I approached that movie, and that's how I wanted to take it. And I think that for a film like this, that's the way to approach it. So I didn't necessarily love it, didn't hate it. It was just a movie with a few issues, made me laugh at times, but it probably could have been a lot more. It probably could have captured that middle ground a little bit better if it hadn't been so concerned with pushing its own message,
When I think about critics on YouTube, I Nerdrotic, The Quartering, Pop Culture Crisis, or you as well, when I first hear you, I think, oh gosh, they think a lot like me. Oh, they must be conservative. And then I get to know them a little bit, or I reach out to them, or I somehow interact, or I follow them, and they're not. And I find that there's this whole new wave of critics who are either apolitical, maybe center-right at best, and yet they approach Hollywood in a way that I do, which is openly conservative. Maybe just kind of look at your own work and your own opinions or things. Do you consider yourself a political creature at all? Does that factor in at all? I mean, how do you kind of balance that with your approach? Because it sounds like you're trying to be as apolitical as possible, but we all have our beliefs, we all have our systems. How does that all square?
I mean, yeah, like, everyone has their own view of the world and how they'd like things to be. But my general view of politics is like, oh God, that's the stuff for old men. Like, it's so boring. I don't want to get involved in that. it's that simple-minded view of I just want to be entertained, man. I just want movies that speak to me as a person, like that tell interesting stories, and it doesn't have to be left or right leaning or anything like that. It just be a good, compelling story. And I, as I said earlier, you could have a movie with progressive ideas that it puts forward, as long as it's told within a comprehensive, well thought out story, it can work fine. You can also have a movie with very traditional conservative viewpoints. But again, if it's told within a well-rounded, well thought out story that just speaks to you on a universal level, again, I've got no problem with it whatsoever. So, I guess from an ideal point of view, as a movie reviewer, you want to try and be apolitical, because I don't want to automatically shit on a movie just because it's liberal or because it's conservative. I don't want to discount certain stories or certain viewpoints just because they fall within a certain point on the political spectrum, because you shouldn't do that. You should take each story as it comes, as its own thing, and let it stand on its own merits. And that's what I try to do as much as I possibly can.
We're talking mostly about movies right now, and I think if this conversation was happening a decade ago, it would be very different than what we're having right now. Were there cultural moments that made this change happen? That we talk about the messaging, we talk about about the flawless characters in the Star Wars franchise, for example, which you've expounded on so well. You've dissected the latest Indiana Jones movie. What led us to this point? Have there been moments, either political, cultural, I don't even know what other arena it might be in, but how do we get here?
I mean, and this is just supposition on my part, but I would assume from a Hollywood perspective, a lot of the current cultural perspective, the zeitgeist that we're in right now, came from Harvey Weinstein, and like all the stuff that came out about him. That sparked a real counter movement in Hollywood of, oh my God, like women have been taken advantage of for so long in Hollywood. They've been made into sex objects, all that sort of stuff. We need to do something to counter that. And so what you ended up with was the swing of the pendulum in the complete opposite direction, to the point where it's just become counterproductive now, where you got the rise of the girl boss, the Mary Sue archetype that can just do everything and is brilliant at everything and never gets challenged by anything. And it does the exact opposite of what they were intending, because we've had characters that were great, that were interesting, that were flawed over decades. We've had great female characters in Hollywood, but they took it upon themselves to take the shortcut to strength, the superficial appearance of strength in their female characters, which results in zero weaknesses. And when you have no weaknesses, you have no possibility for character development, because you've got no flaws, you've got no struggles, you've got no obstacles to overcome, and you don't have a story. That's the thing that they've still never learned. They've never been able to square that problem in their minds. We recognize it and we've called it out multiple times, but when we do call it out, we're getting labeled as bigots or sexists or misogynists or whatever, and it's all nonsense. But like, that's the game that gets played. And it's fun to watch it play out, because ultimately they keep bashing their head up against a brick wall of reality time and time again. And I don't know how many box office failures you can have before you say, yeah, this just isn't working anymore,
Yeah. Speaking of box office failures, this has been a really interesting year. And I guess if you take away Barbenheimer, it was a disaster in many, many ways. Does a year like this, combined with a lot of the streaming companies just hemorrhaging money, combined with what's going on with Disney, which is a story unto itself, do these combination of factors cause any proactive shifts within Hollywood? Can they look at this and say, we need a different plan? Is there any sense that there's a teachable moment happening at the moment, or do you think it's full steam ahead for the time being?
No, I think changes do happen, but they happen slowly in Hollywood. I mean, you'll know yourself, like when you want to commission a movie, from idea until the premiere, that is like a period of like 3 or 4 years easily. to develop the script, to get the actors, to do the production, to film it, to then do the post-production. That takes years. And so what you see is a delayed effect. So you're seeing movies now that were brought about in like 2018, 2019. That's the mindset that they were spawned in. And so it was a very different world back then than what it is now. And so part of that is just the very slow reaction of Hollywood to the problems that they're facing now. But I think the shift is happening because you get movies like The Marvels, which has had the lowest box office returns of any Marvel movie ever. It's not even reached 200 million. That is disastrously bad compared to a world where every Marvel movie was reaching $1 billion 3 or 4 years ago. This is where we're at now. That's the sort of box office failure, and that's the sort of raw financial numbers that you just can't ignore. Because if you keep ignoring it, you're going to run out of money eventually as a studio. You can't keep doing this.
Yeah, and it seemed like for a while they could. They seemed like they were flush with cash, but the numbers aren't adding up like they used to. It's been interesting to watch that from afar. Critics obviously, like yourself, are often accused of being too critical. You're too tough, whatever. But you are also an artist. You're an author. You've written a book series, the Ryan Drake books. Also, Dark Harvest is a zombie thriller. When you change hats, when you're creating for a day instead of maybe doing videos, does one impact the other? Can being a critic kind of wash over yourself as an artist? I mean, do they kind of work together, or are they just completely different skill sets?
I mean, I was an artist long before I was a critic. So, I mean, those two things in my mind, I am one thing first and foremost before I am the other thing. But I hope at least that having experience in one arena, being an artist and the struggle that it is to create a good story and good characters and so on, gives me a little bit of insight into where it can go wrong when other people do it badly. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I try to approach it. But I would hope, that what I produce can stand on its own merits and people can look at it, judge it. And if they're fair, they would either see it as being good or bad. And I do my best. And with every book that I've produced, every story that I've written, I can at least say, well, that's the best I can make at that time. So I hope that people would at least see that and judge it on its own merits. The judgment of the books that I've written seems to be pretty positive so far. I've got a short film coming out probably in the next couple of months. And we'll see how people like that, and we'll go from there, But yeah. I'm incredibly grateful to be able to do this stuff now. This arena that I'm in, being a YouTuber, has opened up a lot of doors to be able to make things happen that I wouldn't have been able to do before. So it's a great thing to be doing,
I've been reviewing films for a while, and once in a blue moon, I will get a DM, an email, some sort of message from the people that I'm reviewing, a director or a screenwriter. And it's always a weird feeling because I can throw some sharp elbows like any critic. And then there's the personal, oh my gosh, I wrote this review. Yeah. And then the artist read it and they've got a comment, and it could be positive, it could be negative. And I have to say, honestly, it hurts. Or it's real. It makes it feel different than hey, I woke up today, I wrote a story, I published it, and I'm on to the next. Have you had that experience where people reach out to you, and it could be positive or negative, or, I mean, I guess it's more impactful when it's negative and they've got a bone to pick with you, but has that happened yet? And what's your reaction to that? Because it feels weird for me. I can't imagine you've got a much bigger platform.
It definitely has, yeah, for various things that I've critiqued. And I've been quite lucky because most of the time when people have reached out to me is because I've given a relatively positive review of the thing that they've made. I did a review of Nobody, that thing with Bob Odenkirk. And the director reached out to me and says, "Hey, I'm glad you enjoyed the movie." It was, I appreciate that. And that's awesome. But yeah, it is a real weird mental disconnect because you are very used to just critiquing the movie as an abstract thing. It's just a product that's put in front of you, and you don't think too much about the people who made it. Because if you did, it would be very difficult to critique it because it's as a human being, you don't want to shit on other people's work for no reason. You don't want to just make people feel bad about what they made. But you have to be able to divorce yourself from that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to give a fair analysis of it. but yeah, like every so often, sometimes people do reach out to you that made the thing that you're critiquing, and it might have been bad in some cases, and you do feel an element of guilt because, yeah, you don't want to just arbitrarily take a dump on someone else's work. You don't want to make them feel bad about what they made, but at the same time, as long as you can say honestly, I was fair with that thing. I didn't just go in on this thing wanting to hate it. I was fair and I judged it on its own merits and I praised the good things and I criticized the bad things. I think you're okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I always aim for, just being fair.
I will say it is a lot of fun when a bad movie comes out and I can look to your site and look to your videos and check out what you have to say. But I want to be a little positive as well. Are there elements of hope that you see, maybe indie studios that are making interesting films, even if they're not all successful, maybe directors that you've noted, they're pretty good. They have a fresh vision. They've got something interesting to say, even if they don't hit a home run every time. Anything come to mind about just where you could steer people to some intriguing new projects or even just fresh voices?
I think so. Yeah, like a lot of it comes from the Far East at the present time. I'm watching a TV show called Blue Eye Samurai on Netflix, which is fantastic. Like great, samurai themed like drama, epic historical fiction. The Godzilla -1 has just come out. It was a movie made on a budget of $15 million, but it looks like it cost 10 times as much. It looks fantastic. It's really good. Again, this can be done. Movies can be done on relatively small budgets and still be, deliver on the spectacle. The Creator was another good example of that, where okay, it wasn't perfect, but like it was done on $80 million budget, looks incredible, a good sci-fi movie that deals with some interesting new ideas. That's the kind of thing I want to see more of. Less of the franchise movies, less of the superhero movies, less of the remakes, just new stories, exploring new ground. That's what I want.
When I saw the the budget for The Creator, I thought that was a typo. I couldn't possibly be 80 million, but they did it, and that's a sign of what can be done on a efficient budget, I guess you could say. Obviously we talked just about people reaching out to you, maybe some feedback, maybe something good or bad. But do you ever get studio executives or just someone within the industries reaching out and saying, "Hey, do you have advice for me?" I mean, I would think if I'm anyone in Hollywood that I would reach out to voices like you and say, okay, what are we doing wrong? What would you recommend? I'd want to tap your wisdom because you've got a following and that you don't have a following unless you're connecting with the audience. And I think that's the main connection that's missing in Hollywood these days. So do you find people reaching out to you from that perspective? You don't have to say who it was, but are any creators just generally reaching out and saying, hey, I'd like some advice. I'd like some tips. What are your viewers saying that I could kind of take advantage of?
I mean, you definitely get that, but it's generally from like independent, writers, film producers, that sort of thing, like relatively like smaller people who are just starting out or whatever, and they want a bit of advice about good screenwriting, good character development, that sort of thing. When it comes to like bigger Hollywood productions, like and studios and so on, yep, I've definitely had people come to me, but it's more on the level of, we've seen your videos. We get where you're coming from, and we're trying to address some of the problems that you've mentioned. So people are aware of it, and it shocks me. Like it genuinely does, because I see what I do is, I make my videos for an audience of just regular people, just normal people who watch movies and aren't like particularly connected to the industry or whatever. Never really thinking that, hey, maybe directors or studio executives might take notice of this as well. But when you find out that they do, it's like, oh, wow, this is weird. People actually do know who I am. So, it's weird. But again, I would want to stand by the principle that like what I say, I would say to them as much as I would say to just the average person on the street.
Well, I think it's
You
a
know,
positive development, though, honestly, that they're reaching out to you because they're recognizing that you're not just a critic, you're not just someone trying to slam the industry, that you have something greater at heart, that you really do want to see better product. And if they want the same, and if they can kind of divorce themselves of their brand and their mission, then they'd want to connect with someone like you and reach out and whatever they could learn would be beneficial, I would think.
Oh, yeah. You'd be amazed the number of people who it's that whole classic meme of like the woman who's about to get burned at the stake, and the guy who's holding the torch says, "I secretly agree with you." There's a lot of people like that who are just like, "Yep, I get where you're coming from. I totally agree, but I just can't speak out in Hollywood right now because that's the climate that we're living in." And I feel so bad for them because it must be so frustrating.
Well, I mean, there are artists who can't have a voice, and that must be maddening to them. But that's partly of their own creation. We talked before about Lady Ballers, and for better or worse, the movie would never exist without the Daily Wire. And I followed a lot of comedians who are creating great stuff. Ryan Long, Tyler Fisher, but they're doing it on Patreon, they're doing it on YouTube, they're doing it on all these different platforms. Do you think, and they're successful, by the way, will that maybe help Hollywood change, adapt, grow? That pressure, the fact that all these independent artists are doing it on such a small budget. I mean, like for me, when I go to bed, I might put on one of your videos as opposed to watching Netflix. And yet your budget is much, much less than anything that's on Netflix. And yet you have a comparable entertainment value. Could that be something, a powerful force that changes some things in Hollywood? It makes them adapt, change, mature, grow in any capacity?
I think what you have to do is puncture the bubble. And the way you do that is through shows or movies that cross those boundaries. Now, South Park is a great example of that, where they did things like, they tackled the whole issue of transgender athletes probably better than Lady Ballers did. And they tackled like the whole issue of pandering and diversity quotas and all that crap that you get coming out of Disney. With Into the Panderverse. That's a show that like is mainstream enough that people in the industry would know about it. And when it happens, it sends ripples through what they do. That's how you change the perception, because it's one thing for comedians to be operating on like their own streaming platform or YouTube or whatever. You can choose to watch that or ignore it. But like that's the stuff that really crosses the boundaries. Things that have got like appeal to both sides of the divide. And I think that's what you get. Once you've had that, once it opens out those floodgates and it makes it acceptable to talk about stuff like this, I think you start to see more and more of it. And you'll see the shift. It will happen. I definitely think it will, because people know now that what they're seeing is not making them happy. There is a problem with the output of Hollywood now.
Yeah.
And that problem is reflected in the money that they're making, i.e. a lot less than they used to, because they're not giving the audience what they want anymore. They're giving the audience what they think they want to see, but it's not.
The South Park example is excellent on two fronts. One, the Panderverse episode really did ricochet around the culture in ways that doesn't always happen. But also a few months earlier, they did the Harry and Meghan expose. And I felt like after that aired, it was suddenly okay to be critical of the royal couple in public. Piers Morgan lost a gig because he was very critical of the couple. And it felt like maybe if that had happened after the South Park episode, that maybe it would have a different reaction. It would land differently. But critical, before we let you go, you mentioned there's a short film coming up, but your cloud is growing, your audience is growing. It does offer opportunities for you. I don't know whether it's 2024 is too soon, but what would you like to do next? I mean, obviously you want to keep on making the videos. That's your bread and butter. But are there other things you'd like to do, other ways to kind of expand what you've been able to accomplish so far?
Well, I mean, I love to, break down storytelling and stuff and be a critic. But I also love to create things in my own right. I mean, that's how I got started. Fundamentally, I'm a storyteller. I love to do that stuff. I love to make things. And so the short film Rogue Elements is the first step in that process. We did our Kickstarter for it. We were very lucky that people were extremely supportive, and we were able to make a really good short film with this. I think people are going to be very impressed when it comes out. And that's the first step towards making more stuff, because, hey, I've got like 9-10 books worth of material there that I'd like to see adapted. Let's see what we can do with that. It's all about, creating your own ecosystem of content. And it's one thing to critique what other people have made. It's another thing to say, hey, I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and I'm going to try it myself. And that's what I'm going to try and do now. And moving forward.
The best part is no studio notes, no one breathing down your neck. It's just you calling the shots. But Critical Drinker, thank you so much for joining the show. And of course, you can find his great videos by searching at The Critical Drinker on YouTube. And if you want more stories, you can check out his Ryan Drake book series at Amazon or your favorite bookseller. And of course, if you need the merch, you've got drinkershop.com. You can find lots of great stuff there too. So keep up the sober commentary. And thank you so much. I really enjoy your work.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
I think it's safe to say that no one had a better 2023 than Taylor Swift. What a year. 2024? Well, that could get a little complicated for Tay-Tay. The pop princess is already feeling the heat from multiple op-eds about the upcoming elections. We're not even there yet. We're almost there, obviously. But we're all thinking about 2024 and the presidential election to come. Now, she stood down this year when it came to politics. She toured the nation, just absolutely the pinnacle of fame, of excitement, of intensity, you name it, that was the Eras Tour. And she didn't get on a soapbox. It was pretty amazing because she has gotten political in recent years and she just toned it down, just sang. What did Laura Ingraham say? Shut up and sing? Well, she did just that. And of course, just a tremendous year. I don't think Time Magazine makes you the person of the year if you had an iffy year. She crushed it, no doubt. So now we're seeing some think pieces from The Hill and MSNBC saying, you know what? Taylor Swift can drag Joe Biden across the finish line again. And I think there's a little truth to that. Now, Taylor Swift has been really successful at getting people to register to vote. Of course, it's a two-step process. You register, then you actually vote. That matters a little bit more. But when you get those young people out there and get them activated and get them interested in the election, well, that does matter. That could change some election results for sure. And as we know, the youth vote leans to the left. It's sad, and it's true. And I think maybe the only thing that can give the Biden campaign a pulse is a shout-out from Taylor Swift. Imagine if she brought him out on tour, or she joined hands with him or something like that. That would really get people's attention. But will she do it? In the recent past, she's gotten political. She's pushed progressive causes, promoted progressive candidates, and listen, that made some sense to some voters. I don't agree with those views, but those were legitimate issues, and you could agree or disagree. That's fine. But Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, have you heard him speak? Have you seen his record? Oh man, that's rough. The pressure on Swift is going to be intense, I guarantee it. And letting her voters decide who to vote for in 2024, that's not going to go over well in the media and with her fellow leftists. In fact, the last time she took a knee during an election cycle was 2016. She sat out the Trump-Hillary Clinton slugfest, and boy, did the press let her have it. How dare she not use her voice? What is she doing? Does she secretly love Trump? There was even a suggestion that she might be a white supremacist. Why? Well, there were a whole bunch of white supremacists who like her. I mean, she is beautiful. She is talented. I get that. Anyone who wouldn't like Taylor Swift, that's not her fault. But the Daily Beast, well, they get a little angry about the situation. This is what the headline that they used about the situation. It's time for Taylor Swift to denounce her neo-Nazi admirers. Really? She has to do that? That's absurd. But if you think that's bad, imagine if Taylor Swift decides to lay low and not endorse Joe Biden in 2024. Let me tell you, the press will make that neo-Nazi attack line seem quaint by comparison. Trust me. Well, that's it for the show. Thank you to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. And of course, while I have your attention, I hope you'll drop by HollywoodInToto.com. It's updated 7 days a week. You got news, reviews, commentary, everything that's going on in Hollywood. And of course, 2024 is our 10-year anniversary. I can't believe it. From 2014 to today, it remains the right take on entertainment. See you next time, and Happy New Year.
It's time for another season of The Palmetto Porch, an original podcast from Discover South Carolina. I'm Devin Whitmire. Join me as I get to the heart of what makes South Carolina such a great place to visit by speaking to the locals who make it so special. Premiering December 5th, find The Palmetto Porch wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information about our show, visit scpalmettoporch.com.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.